Hello, my lovely humans. So I recently celebrated my dog's 10th birthday and I am in my 30s. Now, I can genuinely say that I much prefer my 30s to my 20s. And despite that, I still think back to those years and months leading up to turning 30. What really stands out to me is how often it felt like my world was ending, or even how pointless and confusing it all seemed. Everyone seemed to have it all figured out, and they were somehow doing it while maintaining a social life, hitting the gym regularly, keeping up with a 10-step skincare routine, and all with this graceful smile on their face. But now, I realize how even though my 20s weren't perfect, some things didn't go exactly as planned, and it felt like I had at least one quarter-life crisis a year. In retrospect, I learned a lot during that decade. My one saving grace was the fire that refused to go out, even on darker days when that flame was reduced to barely glowing embers. It never became fully extinguished. I stayed open to life, and I kept showing up. Now, what exactly have I learned? I was 20, had dyed my hair blonde, if you can imagine it, and got really into makeup. High heels, thick lashes, and loud lipstick were on heavy rotation. In retrospect, it made a lot of sense, especially as a bit of a socially awkward outcast and overachiever. It got tiring always being me, and I wanted in my heart of hearts to belong. At the time, I thought that if I just changed my hair, if my lashes were longer, if my clothes were more fashionable, if I said and did what I thought I should do, then maybe I'd finally belong. The thing is, and what the years have taught me, is that you don't need to look or be perfect, however that's defined. And then came 21, if you can imagine it. I was a new graduate heading out into the real world. The world was my oyster. Once I crossed the stage and was handed my diploma, that beautiful symbol of my commitment to my education and my investment in myself. Okay, so question, have you ever seen ducks on a pond? They seem to float almost effortlessly on top of the water. Over the water, they seem to casually float this way and that. So calm, so peaceful. But if you look at them from underwater, you'd see something different. Their webbed feet paddling about, steering, changing course, propelling them left, right, and forward. That was me going into interviews and at my first real job. Calm exterior, buzzing interior. On the surface, I had it together. A bright-eyed, bushy-tailed graduate filled with enthusiasm, chutzpah, and freshly graduated knowledge. But under the surface, I felt berserk as a tightrope walker in a 3-ring circus. I was making a decent income, and I had a steady, comfortable job at a huge company with plenty of perks. I was in a position that most of my peers envied at that stage. But that didn't stop questions from rattling in my brain. At first, they were dull, muffled thumps, but they grew louder with each passing night. Am I on the right path? Am I the only one who feels this lost? Everyone else seems to know exactly what they're doing and how to do it. What gives? And eventually, I learned one of life's truths. 21 taught me that nobody has it all completely figured out. 22 was a year of massive personal and professional shifts that would completely change the trajectory of my life's path as I knew it. At a professional level, I was climbing the ladder, making waves, and people were taking notice. I was hungry for success and moving up quickly. But let's rewind a bit. There's no doubt that I lucked out when it came to my job, my colleagues, and my leadership team. My team was wonderful, and I was beyond blessed to land a corporate role like this at a major company right out of school. And as grateful as I am, and was for the position, I felt like there was something missing. Even now, there is a voice in the back of my mind that wonders if the move I made was ultimately a selfish one, but I digress. The income was flowing, but something didn't feel quite right, and yet I trudged on. I was getting accolades, but pulling late hours well past 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and waking up well before the sun. And yet, I trudged on. Even when I started to wonder how much longer I could keep this up, I trudged on. There's an idea that working hard for something we hate is called stress, and working hard for something we love is called passion. And at first, I thought that meant that we had to love every moment of what we're doing, and then it would be called passion. But I think it goes beyond that too. Working hard for something we love can also mean working hard for our future dreams, even if it means our present reality is a bit rough, or maybe working hard for more freedom of time or location, or even working hard for the people we love. I learned a lot about myself at 22, and while there was a lot of figuring out to do, I'm glad that with persistence, self-reflection, and a mentor to show me the way, I kept moving forward. So, I think that's something I'm really glad I learned earlier on in my 20s, to keep moving forward and to keep taking steps. Because I do think that front-loading your efforts by making the most of your 20s does pay off when it comes to setting yourself up for success later on in life. Although, of course, it's never too late to start. After some time, I started to feel worn out. At 23, I wanted to spread my wings, see the world. I wanted to experience different cultures and perspectives. A layer beneath that, well, there's something to be said about vacations as a form of escapism. I think it was a mix of column A and a little bit of column B, looking back. Have you ever heard of people complaining that they need a vacation after their vacation? That was me. When I got back, I was greeted with an explosion of emails that needed my urgent attention, problems that went unresolved during my time off that needed to be addressed yesterday, and new tasks and workflows that were introduced when I was away I needed to get acquainted with immediately. I was already looking for the next flight out. What was supposed to make me feel refreshed and recharged instead had the complete opposite effect. And while I didn't learn this lesson right away, I came to realize that vacations don't cure burnout. I'm not at all suggesting that vacations are a bad idea, nor am I saying that we should be all work, no play. However, I've come to appreciate work-life integration, and I actually really love vacations and traveling. They're things I enjoy, but I don't turn to them as a solution for burnout. And instead, I aim to live a life from which I don't need to escape. 24, 25, and 26, what can I say? Those years challenged me to face some demons that I tried really hard to suppress for as long as I could. But these were the big leagues. First, I stood true to my decision to become a homeowner. But being a homeowner in Toronto does not come cheap. Basic rule in economics: supply and demand. Demand was and is sky high with a growing population. Supply, on the other hand, was low. So if I wanted to be serious and if I wanted to reach that goal, I needed to get with a program as far as financial literacy goes. Without getting into the weeds and overcomplicating things, financial freedom, I think, breaks down to these 3 guidelines about money. First, generate it. Generate as much income as you can. Step 2, leverage it. At some point, if you've been semi-decent at making money, you'll have lots of money, or at least more of it, but you might not have a lot of time. So you can then use your money to buy back time and also increase your earning potential. Step 3, multiply it. As someone who was just starting out and who never really learned about financial literacy at school, I needed to generate as much as possible to reach levels 2 and 3. Call me gauche, but money matters even if it isn't the most important thing. On the road to home ownership, I had to generate, budget, save, rinse, and repeat. And the thing is, when you see all of your friends and colleagues buying the latest tech, designer bags, or the trendiest looks while you're scrimping, that's when the FOMO really starts to set in. Can I make a confession? I wasn't always 100% diligent, and I did cave into my impulses here and there. I'm only human. It was spring, and the pastels were in full bloom. I remember buying this mint green crossbody bag that, at the time, I thought was the height of fashion. It had to be big enough to fit my phone, my keys, a few basics, but small enough to carry with me on a nice evening out. It also had to be casual enough for daytime, but with the potential to be dressed up for the evening. Basically, it had to have it all. And when I bought it, I was pretty happy. It ticked all the boxes, it looked chic, and it made me feel like, well, that I made it. I had a fancy career and could afford a nice bag to match. Plus, if I wore it enough, I could justify the purchase by getting it to work out to about $1 per wear. I mean, it's a bargain, right? I loved bringing that bag around with me, almost everywhere. For a while, it was my go-to. You'd find it draped across my front or hanging loosely by my side while getting groceries, going for a stroll somewhere picturesque with my friends, or heading to the movies. And while I don't regret it, that initial burst of happiness didn't last long. It took maybe a week before the bag became just another container of goods that I couldn't carry in my hands or fit in my pockets. The magic dissipated. Actually, this is the case for a lot of things, at least in my case. Doom scrolling on social media for stimulation, to avoid boredom, or to avoid the anxiety of starting a task. Maybe even buying another trending new lamp or room decor item from Amazon. These cheap hits of dopamine, or cheap thrills as I call them, may have helped me avoid some uncomfortable feelings in the moment, but it didn't really last. And once the cheap thrill fades, what do you have? You find yourself craving that next one, and that next one. Real quality happiness beats cheap thrills any day. For me, this can come from things like a 10-minute walk, 30 to 60 minutes of strength training. I'm actually pretty proud of my deadlift. Or even planning out the script for this video. They come from doing the hard things, overcoming resistance and pushing through to complete the task that isn't easy but is probably better for me in the long run. But seriously, nobody told me what to expect and how different it would be to live out on my own. Although in reality, I had no one to blame but myself. Like every story, there are two sides to this one. Possibly more. The A side, the side I wanted everyone to see, was that I finally had freedom. My own space, my own furniture, my own decor, my own time, my own life. Then there was the B side. The side I was embarrassed to share out loud for a long time. Bills to keep the lights on and the roof over my head, bills to feed myself, to clothe myself, to get from place to place. Time to handle everything on my own, and a general sense of overwhelm. I think the first 3 to about 6 months of doing anything new can be really hard, no matter what. This could refer to starting university or college, starting a new career, starting an entrepreneurial journey, and more. Adjusting to anything new is tough, especially when our brains are wired to crave what's familiar. From the perspective of cave people, our ancestors, those hunter-gatherer ancestors that we had way back, this makes a lot of sense. We want to stick with something familiar, like those berries in that bush we've been picking at for years, that we know won't hurt us. But in today's world, with things changing so rapidly and so drastically, constantly, embracing risk and embracing the unfamiliar can be more of an advantage. I came to learn that something had to change in my own personal situation. I wasn't sleeping well, and my health in all aspects, mental, physical, and emotional, were taking a toll. It turns out that the answer to most problems is to either change the situation or to change the way you think about the situation. So I could either change something in my life or environment that was causing this inner turmoil, or I could change the way I interpreted and reacted to stimuli. In my situation, I could either adjust something in my career or home life to make it more bearable, or I could trust the passage of time, trust the process, and thus change the way I reacted to spreading my wings and being out on my own for the first time. It was a challenge after all. As with most things, I opted for a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. Then came 27. How was I already in my late 20s? I didn't know it then, but I was about to face one of the biggest betrayals of my life. How could I know? This was someone I considered a mentor, a friend, for about half my life. I'll spare you the details, at least for now. To this day, it's still difficult to bring up, and I see how challenging it's made it for me to trust anyone. While it wasn't the case here, I want you to know that there are people who have your best interest at heart. Those are the ones you want to keep close to you. The right mentor can be the ultimate shortcut to success. Really. They've been there, they've done that, and they know how to help you along the process so that you can avoid similar pitfalls, or at least help you pick up the pieces and keep moving forward when things fall through. A great mentor is a great thing to have. What can I say about 28? After facing what I call the great betrayal, life got quiet. This was both good and bad. I think I mentioned earlier that I was already a bit of a socially awkward turtle to begin with, so I didn't exactly have friends to spare. I took what seemed to be decent advice at the time and I put myself out there. I made active efforts to stay in touch with friends and make new ones. I went to networking events, invited people for dinners and hangouts, and I even said yes to more invitations, even if it wasn't something that I thought I might love. I just wanted to take myself outside of my comfort zone. You know how in the show Friends, they go through heartbreak, career trouble, family issues, and everything in between. But because they have each other, it all seems to turn out okay. They have each other to lean on, and suddenly all of life's challenges seem to be more manageable. I think that's what I pictured in my mind. I imagined somehow finding this perfect friend group, and we'd all bring each other up and help each other through the tough times. Even though it didn't exactly turn out this way, quality relationships are worth the effort, I think. Harvard ran a decades-long study and found that close relationships, and particularly being satisfied in those relationships, kept people happier throughout their lives. At age 50, it wasn't their cholesterol that predicted how they'd be doing at age 80. It was the participants who were most satisfied in their relationships who fared best. And of course, we can discuss correlation, causation, sources of error, all of that, but I just don't see how having strong and healthy connections could be a bad thing. So to my younger self, make friends early and often. Don't compromise your introverted nature by any means, but connections do bring meaning to life, so don't shy away from it too much. By 29, the last year of my 20s, I don't know exactly how it happened, but I hit some sort of stride. I was helping more students achieve their goals more than I ever thought I could. I achieved my dream of taking my parents on their dream trip across Europe. This was something they'd been mentioning for years. I planned it from start to finish, and it felt like this incredible accomplishment to be able to show my gratitude and thank them for putting up with my difficult self all these years, especially during my high school days. On the personal front, I was working on untangling some struggles, and I also met someone who seemed to match my stride and shared a similar vision of a great life. This took a lot of pruning. Pareto's 80-20 principle says that 80% of any given output is determined by 20% of the input. If that's the case, I had to start focusing on the right 20% to get the most out of my efforts. This isn't easy for me to do, and it's still a work in progress, admittedly, because I sure do love a shiny penny. Letting distractions pass and staying true to what is most important can be a lifelong challenge, but it's not one I'm backing down from. I knew that the students and families I was helping mattered. I knew that my family and my little puppy mattered. I knew that being in a healthy, happy relationship mattered, and I knew that financial health mattered. I grew to learn that it's easier to optimize for one thing or a few things and get those to a really solid place than to try to do 100 things in a wishy-washy fashion at the same time. But that doesn't mean that you should only focus on one thing at the expense of everything else. But if you can get out of your own way, do the work, and also show yourself some kindness when you really need it, I'm sure you'll be well on your way. Hey there! Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more, I hope you'll consider giving this video a like, a share, subscribing, or maybe even hitting that notification bell. Live your best day today, and I'll see you next time.